Hi, I'm Craig, and I help veterans go from feeling stuck and unseen after service to living with confidence, connection, and purpose so that they can thrive in civilian life and relationships. Hey vets and families, welcome back to my channel, and today we're talking about hypertension. Now, hypertension is one of the most common and unfortunately one of the most misunderstood VA conditions. We're going to break this down using the same structure for the series. First, we're going to talk about the condition, system, and name, as you know. We're going to talk about how the VA rates it. We're going to delve into some case law that might be helpful for you submitting your claim, and then we'll talk about evidentiary support strategy for post-service claims. Let's get into it. Hypertension is defined by the VA as diastolic pressure, predominantly 90 or greater, or the consistent use of medication to manage high blood pressure. And there are so many veterans who are dealing with this issue. And so I thought it really appropriate to do a video about this so that I can inform and educate vets on how to submit a successful claim. It falls under the cardiovascular system and is evaluated under 38 CFR 4.104 diagnostic code 7101. For veterans, hypertension is often connected to chronic stress, PTSD, chronic pain, sleep apnea, toxic exposures, and obesity as an intermediate step. It's also now a presumptive Agent Orange condition. So this is a major benefit for many Vietnam era veterans, veterans who come from that particular age who would have had the likelihood of being exposed to Agent Orange and have developed a cancer or have developed other things, hypertension as a result of that. It's now a presumptive condition. So make sure you tell all your friends who are veterans, all the buddies that you served with, that a presumptive Agent Orange condition, if they served Agent Orange condition, if they served in that time, is now presumptive for hypertension. Now we're going to discuss how the VA considers hypertension on the rating scale, and I wouldn't normally do this on other videos. I would just say the ranges go from 0 to 100%. But because hypertension is so specific, I'm going to talk about each level of rating because there's specific criteria at each rating level. So your rating level will be 60% if the diastolic is 130 or higher, 40% if diastolic is 120 or higher, 20% if the diastolic is 110 plus or the systolic is 200 or higher, 10% if diastolic is 100 or higher, systolic 160 or higher, or listen to this closely, if there is a history requiring continuous medication for hypertension. And then it's 0% if it's controlled with medication, but readings don't reach the rating thresholds. In other words, if you get a 0% hypertension rating, this is the VA saying you do have a diagnosed condition. It just doesn't reach the level of compensation. Now, most veterans qualify for at least 10% if they can show that they've been prescribed medication consistently. So make sure you have all of your prescribed med documentation. Make sure you have your condition list. Make sure you have your journals. Make sure you have your treatment documentation. And if you have experienced high blood pressure and hypertension, you should be eligible for a rating of at least 10%. Let's look at case law, vets and families. And one of the biggest cases for hypertension, one of the biggest cases is McCarroll versus McDonald. And this case clarified that the VA must consider medication use, even if there are controlled readings by that medication use. In other words, if ever you were put on medication for hypertension, the VA's got to consider the dosage and the frequency of that medication, even if you didn't meet the diastolic and systolic levels. Okay, so if you have medication for diagnostic treatment under McCarroll, for hypertension treatment under McCarroll versus McDonald, if you have that medication at any time in your military career, right, the VA must consider that medication. We also lean on Gilbert versus Derwinski. This supports that granting the benefit of the doubt when blood pressure readings fluctuate or when service treatment records don't capture every medical visit. So even if you didn't really get in your service treatment records, for some reason it didn't get in your records, okay, during that time, but then you at some point were having high blood pressure or showed symptoms of hypertension, then the benefit of the doubt in those cases have to go to the veteran. And that's where Gilbert versus Derwinski can be very valuable and beneficial. Additionally, the M21-1 includes extensive guidance linking hypertension to PTSD, Agent Orange exposure, and kidney disease. This is where we start talking about secondary conditions to hypertension, okay? And we start talking about where hypertension can be secondary to other conditions. This case law gives veterans strong footing to challenge unfair decisions. And typically when we cite case law is when we get to the HLR and BVA level. Probably more so BVA level, because HLR, we don't present any new evidence, but we can point the VA to certain case law and to certain CFR regulations and M21-1 regulations, because we are able to write a letter at the HLR level. Now let's move to an evidentiary support strategy for post-service claims of hypertension. The VA prefers multiple readings over time when they look at hypertension, and they don't look at just one isolated number. I've had some clients who have shown in their records that they had high blood pressure at one time in their careers, but because there was not a consistent over time readings that showed, hey, this is a common thing with them, it's high blood pressure, and it meets the actual specific hard and fast numbers, they weren't able, unfortunately, to get any compensable percentage. We've been able to get some people up to the 0% rating where the VA actually recognizes that there is a hypertension condition, but if it does not meet that criteria in multiple readings over time, they weren't able to get it. So here's what the VA looks at, and here are some specific guidelines with regard to providing documentation. You've got primary care visits, specialist records, home blood pressure logs. They've got those blood pressure machines you got at home now. You can just take your blood pressure. If you decide to do that and you're in the military, make sure you write it down when you're taking your blood pressure at home, if for whatever reason you can't make it to the doctor or can't make it to a military treatment facility. And then urgent care records, if you got to go to the emergency room, that will always be a part of your medical record if you go to urgent care or emergency room or any other urgent care facility. Medication logs are also important. If a doctor prescribes a medication for chronic hypertension, that alone may qualify for 10%. Remember, we talked about earlier how if it's there, right, you may be at least able to qualify for 10% if you've got chronic hypertension and if you take medication for it. The secondary service connections, which we talked about earlier, we'll go into a little bit more now. Hypertension, and I want you to hear me closely, I'll put this up on the screen as well, but hypertension is frequently secondary to PTSD, sleep apnea, diabetes, chronic kidney disease, chronic pain, and obesity as an intermediate step. Remember, obesity as an intermediate step, right, is related to a lot of these conditions, right? Obesity is, and I think I just read an article recently where I think that they're trying to, or maybe they've gotten it pushed through where they're going to look at obesity as a rateable condition. Got to do more research about that. Not sure if that's put in place yet, but I do know that obesity, according to 38 CFR, has always been able to be an intermediate step, and it's also in the M21-1. So that is true, and you can use that when you're filing your hypertension claim. Some exposure links. It's now presumptive for Agent Orange, which we talked about earlier, which means veterans only need a diagnosis and qualifying service if you're going to claim hypertension as a result of exposure to Agent Orange. Make sure you have a strong nexus, not necessarily always a nexus letter, but a strong nexus statement in your personal lay letter, or a strong nexus statement if the doctor that you've been seeing is gracious enough to write a letter for you on your behalf, talking about the things that he or she has already seen as they've been treating you for hypertension. A medical opinion should explain when the hypertension began, what likely caused the hypertension, and then how it relates to service or another service-connected disability. Once you have the diagnosis, once you got the medication history, the consistent readings, hypertension claims becomes significantly easier to win, you guys. You can win your hypertension claim. Just follow these rules and guidelines that I've given you. Continue to watch these videos. Continue to make sure you stay connected to how you are feeling and the documentation and the journaling of your symptoms, and you should be good to go. Okay, vets and families, if you like this breakdown and it helped you, hit that like button so that more veterans can find this video and get the help they need for submitting their hypertension claims. Now, hypertension might seem straightforward, but the VA still denies thousands of claims every year because the evidence isn't properly organized or connected. I can help you do that. If you want expert support to build strong evidentiary facts and evidentiary evidence for your hypertension claim, whether that's primary or secondary, like we talked about in the video, click the link in the description and let's work together on getting you the benefits you deserve. I'm Craig. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video of our series, 30 conditions, VA claim conditions in 30 days. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. If you want any more information about the subject of this series, be sure to check out the playlist right here. And remember, live royally and live well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.